Hope the sun is shining. I hope that the birds are singing. I hope the wind is at your back. I got a great show for you today. I have with me here the one and only Jordan Richardson. And for those of you who may not know, let me just tell you a little bit about Jordan. He's a cosmic navigator of the entertainment universe, fusing creativity and rebellion to transcend the ordinary. A USC Thornton School of Music alum, his journey has traversed music, television, tech, thought, and medicine, leaving an indelible mark on each. Excuse me. From Capitol Records' storied halls to SBV Talent Agency's dynamic campaign. Excuse me for 1 minute.
It's true life.
It's True Life Podcast right here.
Love it.
Yeah. He's sculpted cultural narratives with Behind the Music and I Love the 2000s, shaping icons in real time. Jordan's revolutionary spirit sparked the Love is Love brand activation with Absolut Vodka, co-creating SayReal. This independent music group's meteoric rise and acclaim culminated in Hollywood Music and Media Awards, recognized as LA's hottest new band. At Not Impossible Labs, Jordan's visionary talent management ignited projects like The Hunger, Not Impossible, COVID-19 campaign, earning the 2020 Shorty Award and a place in the JFK Library Foundation's New Frontier Forum. His insight graced Aftershock, the sequel to Alvin Toffler's Future Shock. Venturing into precision medical genetics with Myriad Genetics, Inc., Jordan shattered norms, applying his 12 tenets of talent management. He achieved stellar success, securing consecutive President's Club's honors and the title of 2023 Southwest MVP and Western U.S. Mentor of the Year. Through Cardboard Rockets LLC, Jordan champions the belief that every professional is a talent and every leader a talent manager. His voice echoes globally, featured in CNN, Swiss Public Television, Fox, and Reti Televisione Italiane. As a sought-after speaker, he shares psychedelic insights on human connection, talent development, and collaborative innovation. Jordan, thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for that. And that introduction is epic. I appreciate it.
Man. I had to pause. I kept getting stuff stuck in my throat right there. And I'm like, oh, man, I got the cadence, I had everything rocking. I was so stoked on it. And then True Life Podcast right there.
I appreciate that. And I love that. I mean, that's how I like to talk and converse and communicate with people, right? It's just, we're all storytellers. Let's hear it in a different way, not so polished all the time.
Yeah, I think it gives people a real look into how the sausage is made and how people are. And it gives it that feel of authenticity when you come across. And sometimes you got to pause, sometimes you got to think, and you really get to know the individual when you have this stream of consciousness, man, right?
I mean, especially when today, media and content, even, the mom going to buy grocery stores and look how fresh and unique this is. I mean, that's so polished, even that. It's like, what happened to real reality? Like, and actually that reminds me is when I was working at VH1 in the music talent creative development team there, we stopped calling it reality TV because it was non-scripted, right? So that just means we didn't script out everything that was happening, but it was still with these guidelines and these guardrails that made up situational instances where we would try to capitalize on, even just to try to control the narrative a bit, right? But even that, and so nowadays, everything you see is so polished that something like this, like the True Life Podcast, being so fresh and unique and like just raw, is something that's so refreshing. I mean, I think that's what people want to see, and they want to experience is real life.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this idea of talent. Like, I'm really big into relationships and how we see the world, and I think that's evolving. But how do you see our relationship as, individuals making their way through the world? How do you see our relationship with talent evolving? We've gone from this big screen to very polished things to reality TV to unscripted to, live streaming. What's your take on our relationship with talent?
Yeah, I think it goes back to a fundamental belief that I have, is that everybody is a talent, right? You think about this. Like, I always love to say my favorite, like, do you love sushi? Do you like sushi?
Yeah, I like sushi. Sashimi
Is your favorite sushi chef not a talent? Right? What about that admin assistant that helps you drive everyday business? Or I always joke, what about that CPA that gets you out of tax trouble every year?
Yep.
Right? So we have to recognize that there's talent in everything we do and in each one of us.
Yep.
So first of all, that's what I believe. I believe that everyone is a talent. And the second part of that belief is, and anyone can grow to become an effective talent manager. So you really have to come to the place of recognition that you are a talent, you are valuable in whatever you do every day, whether it's at the coffee shop with the barista, or you're engaging with somebody on a Zoom meeting for work. We have
Yeah.
to recognize that there's immense talent in all of us, and I think going back to that key tenet of mine, that everyone is a talent and anyone can grow to become an effective talent manager. I talk about these tenets of how we all get there. And that's why my main keynote is called the 12 Tenets of Talent Management. You have to, at that point, I think, also recognize that all of those things, like spokes to a hub of a wheel, come back to the central idea. And it all comes down to communication and building that trust between individuals. And how do we increase that connectivity? So it's a very long-winded way of going back to your main question and saying that the people who know how to tap into that connectivity with everyday people around you, that's when you're going to make the real impact, and that's when you're going to really see something take form and take hold with people with that authentic take. So talent in general, if we're talking about entertainment, I think you see that huge shift towards authenticity and things that are seemingly refreshing. But really, it just comes back to, how do we all create a world of deeper understanding and connectivity with each other?
That's well said. It reminds me, sometimes you get that feeling when you notice somebody doing something well, or when you notice someone's doing something like in an art form, whether it's your barista, whether it's the sly smile on your tax attorney's face when they're like, watch this, like
Right.
when you notice that beauty in somebody else.
Which we
Do you
don't
think?
do. IRS, we're all up and up in here. So it's just an example.
Exactly. Maybe it's like when you go to whatever, you go to your barista, you go get some food, you see a chef, whatever it is, when you notice that sly, subtle beauty in someone else's actions, do you think on some level that's because you're willing to admire the beauty in yourself?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. I think that when you had noticed those things, I think you partially, subconsciously, you've like desensitized yourself enough to the main narrative that, or not even desensitized is the word I'm looking for. You've
Yeah.
like kind of, you've changed the way of what we've been ingrained as each other, that, oh, I have to be this type of person to be a
Mm.
talent or be successful. I have to be this level of manager or this level of an executive. When you look at something like customer service, those are the people who actually build the brands. Those are the people who actually engage with the customers. They are the face of your brand. So I think when people do recognize in others that, wow, you do an amazing job, and don't have that hubris of like, you're not at this level, or you're not this person, or you have to have a Hollywood like star on the walk of fame, I think you should give yourself a pat on the back for recognizing that that is true. And you've kind of broken away from what they want you to think success looks like. And I say they, meaning, the world around us, how it conditions us.
I like that. Let's talk about the 12 tenets that you came up with. Like how is that something that you've learned along your lifetime? Does that come from experience? Does that come from relationships, all of the above? Or maybe we can dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the above. And again, a lot of my tenets of talent management, they're not necessarily new ideas that are just like, oh my gosh, like I've never thought about that in the world, but I memorialize things based on my experiences in working with talent. And so the 12 tenets of talent management is essentially a modular keynote where I
Mm.
I have these 12 tenets that I learned throughout my career, and these things that have impacted me, the type of you know each tenant is something that I feel like is the type of leader that I strive to be, the type of father that I hope to be, and the
Yeah.
kind of talent that I think we all are. So, I have these 12 tenants that have guided me throughout my career, and I learned of them along the way. And I learned each one of those tenants in my keynote, is tied to a specific celebrity story of who taught me that tenet. So although you may, everyone talks about trust. Like I think my first core tenet in general is listen to build trust. And when you listen to build trust, like you talk about it in a way that's more real, and you're bringing in the grander idea of trust. But the fun niche and spin I put on each one is I say how I learned that lesson through my career and which celebrity taught me that lesson. And I kind of give them an homage to, like, it's an homage to, how much we can all offer from each other. So some of them could throw you for a loop, like, how did you learn that from Lil Wayne? Or how did you learn that from, Linda Perry? Or like Brett Michaels taught you your most significant lesson about listening to build trust, these kind of things like that. So there are things that I think that when you put them all together and when you see them from a different lens a little bit, the message hits differently. And then when I'm putting it together and saying, hey, we're all talent. So like the things you're doing right now, Steven Tyler, Nicole Richie, Snoop Dogg, they're doing the same thing you're doing, and they're teaching other people about it. So you be that person. You help do that. And again, the speech isn't like I sit there and say, tenet number 1, tenet number 2, tenet number 3. But the 12 tenets do cover such a broad swath and area that any keynote, essentially any company that has employees or leadership, any company can benefit from that. So what I do is when I speak at an event, I cater my presentation to around their themes. So I don't come in, I'm not coming in and saying, here's what you need to do, lesson this, this, and this, and this. If you're doing a keynote, or you're doing an all hands or something like that, or a conference, and you're talking about listening to build trust, reciprocity, and I don't know, let's say knowing your talent, knowing your employees, knowing your talent, knowing your customers, those kind of things, then I would pick, this tenant, and this tenant, and I put them together to make it clear and cohesive to your themes. Like, what are you trying to get across? What do you want your people to learn? I'm just here to echo and remind you all that your company's trying to get this out of you and for you and through you and with you. And I just reinforce that message.
It's like next level storytelling, finding the ingredients you need to create the hero's journey on demand. It's kind of mesmerizing.
What's crazy is, like I kind of mentioned before, and I don't remember if we were recording or not, but like, we're all storytellers.
Yeah.
We're all storytellers. If I tell you, hey, how'd you get to work today? Not everybody just says, oh, I drove. But if they're like, how'd you get to work today? Man, I was like a struggle to get out of the house. I left, and then I forgot my keys. I came back. I was driving on the road. I had to go around this accident. The 101 was jammed. All these things. You put all these extra details. Yeah. And so inherently within us, we have this ability to want to know more, to want to draw out and communicate on a deeper level, because that drives to connection. Right?
Yep.
So, I feel like you have to all tap into that. You're a natural storyteller. And so when you're doing anything like a sale, or you're talking to people, or you're communicating or whatnot, you're telling them a story. How do you communicate that story? How do you build the narrative around it to actually make it meaningful and impactful and drive towards actual results? It's different if I just say, all right, here we go. Increase sales 10% this month. Or if I say, hey, you guys were doing an awesome job at driving this future product. I know that there's some challenges of things we can get around, but how can we ideate around this? How can we figure this out? You know what? And what would be the best goal if we can do is, like, let's increase sales by 10% this month. Like, we can do it. That's such a better digestible and story to hear and to be a part of than someone just telling you, you're lucky to work here, or you should be, that gone are those days. So as we communicate with each other in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and everything in between, the story you're telling people, you are actually creating that frame that they see you, so you're creating that narrative for yourself.
It's wonderful to think about the way in which the spoken word can have a real emotional effect on the people around us, not only around us, but part of us. And I guess my next question for you is your inner dialogue, the story you tell yourself in your inner dialogue, does that echo the story that you tell other people? Like, how have you managed that relationship?
Right, that's great. I mean, I it's a great question. I think that I'm a natural I suffer intensely from imposter syndrome, like, all the time, like, all the time. And and I think that's a good for a lot of reasons because it kinda keeps me in check,
Sure.
and it does gut check me of, like, am I doing every day, like, what I'm preaching? Like, because if I'm not doing that, if I feel like, oh yeah, I'm just this like, cool guy that just does, it's so easy and it's like everything comes naturally and whatever, then you lose sight of that. And then your message gets lost. And then the connectivity is gone from your story.
Yep.
So I think that I have, these are my 12 core tenets, for example, because they are truly what I believe and what have helped shape my career. And like I mentioned, who I aspire to also be. So, just because I know something doesn't mean don't falter. We're all fallible. Doesn't mean I forget that. Doesn't mean I can't. I need to remind myself to strive for that. And in fact, as I started speaking more, I was more reminded to be more of the person that I want to be. You know.
Yeah, I do know. I'm curious, can you give us an example of one of the tenets? Maybe you could tell us a story about someone who taught you something that we kind of like the example we spoke of earlier.
Yeah. So I think. Let me see. What's a good
Yeah, now
one?
find a good one, man. I want to hear.
Well, okay. Like, do you like rock? Do you like hip hop? What do you like? And
Um,
if we're gonna go music, or I can go other ways, but
I'm kind of 90s. I was driving with a younger guy yesterday, and he said to me, "Wow, George, you like classical alternative." And I never really heard
mm,
that term before. So I guess I like classical alternative, whether it's I used to go see Rage Against the Machine or the Beastie Boys, or used to see a lot of reggae. I'm a huge fan of like
right.
Ziggy Marley, and I guess that era right there. I guess that kind of dates me a little bit, but
No, no, definitely. I mean, not really. I mean, actually, you mentioned the band SayReal I used to manage, and who are still really
yeah,
good dear friends of mine. Like we did shows with Ziggy and with other Marley family
yeah,
members and stuff. So it's not
it's
it's
awesome,
classic, it's legend, it's legend.
right?
Damien, like all these people are they're
Woo!
still making amazing music.
Talented.
I would say though, since you go in '90s, and since I mentioned it before, like my first core tenet is you know l- listening to build trust, right?
Okay.
Actually, it's my second tenet. So the first tenet is know your talent and know your role. I think if you
Nice.
don't know those two things, even if you're a dad with children, you better know that child and know how to help them achieve and strive. But anyway, I digress. So like if we're going sequentially, then this I think a really good lesson of kind of piggybacking off what we're talking about today is know is listening to build trust. And I won't get into the whole like soliloquy of how the speech wraps around it, but I think the whole point is when we're talking to each other and we're listening, like the conversation we're having right now, I can tell that you're not just sitting there like waiting to talk or waiting to say something. You're listening. You're not fake listening. You're not mirroring what I'm doing. You're not ing me. It's you're building that trust. And I think a lot of times so many people forget to just listen and how much you can learn from that by letting other people just talk. And I start off the kind of tenant. That's the tenant where I kind of tell two stories. Where Naya from SayReal, who's still my great dear friend, one day we were doing a long development session. We were working on new music and all this stuff, and she asked me my advice on something, and I jumped in with a beautiful 5 minute soliloquy of what my opinion was, and she sat there listening quietly and just said, sometimes you talk too much. And sometimes I need you just to tell me that you hear me and that you're understanding what I'm saying. And as much as Naya taught me what not to do, the person who taught me what to do is actually Brett Michaels, front man of the band Poison,
Yeah, of
50 million
course.
records sold, celebrity Prentice winner and alumni, TV star.
Yeah.
And when I was working at VH1, I was working on you know my mentor at the time, and just give you a little context of how this all came about. Like my mentor at the time, she's still my mentor, Leah Horowitz. She did a lot of the production and or the creative development for the biggest music shows we have, like Behind the Music and I Love series, and all these huge stores. Rock of Love was one of the things that she had worked with Brett Michaels to develop. And so we were always bringing Brett in because he was VH1 celebrity, like royalty at VH1. He could do no wrong. Anytime he wanted to sneeze, we'd be like, yes, let's get that on camera and let's create a show around Bret Michaels tissue, you know? And so, you know, we would bring him in for these ideas and things. And the first time I had met him, you know, he said, you know, oh, hi, you know, hi, Jordan, nice to meet you. Like and so I had known him a tiny little bit. And then when I got the opportunity through Leah to cast I Love the 2000s, Bret Michaels was like the first person that I wanted to like bring in and cast on. And so he came in, we went to the shoot date. Again, I didn't really know him. I said hi to him like once before, but on his shoot date, I went to go cover his session where we were recording. And you know, we worked together for that 3 or 4 hours, and it was a great time. The onset activity around him was swirling everybody, and every single person I talked to, or I would see him talk to, he just had this absolute focus and engagement when speaking with them. So worked with him. It was a great day, all the things. He left. I didn't see him again till like a year later or so. And when I went down to meet him, to walk him for this other meeting he was there to talk to us about, before I even had the chance to like stick out my hand and say, hey, Brett, do you remember me? I'm Jordan. Like I worked with you on this show and we did that. And he said, hey, Jordan, hey, nice to see you, buddy. How are you? And like a giddy fanboy, I was just kind of like, oh, okay. Yeah. Hey, how's it going, Brett? You know, and he's like, I said, shockingly, I said, I just didn't expect you to remember me. And he goes, of course I remember you. We talked about X, Y, and Z. Nice. You steered me on those A, B, and C lines we were trying to get, you know, and he just, and I was kind of just flabbergasted and said, and I was like, okay, well, like, yeah, awesome. Great. Like, I'm so glad you remember me, like, yay. And then I started to try to kind of pivot because we were short on time. And I tried to pivot to brief him on the opportunity he was actually there to talk about and to go meet the executives about. And he stopped me and he pulled me off that. And he said he wanted to know more about what was new and exciting in my life. And then he dropped the hammer, which still impresses me to this day and kind of gives me goosebumps. He goes, and remind you, I haven't seen him in a year. He says, how's being a newlywed?
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, like, I'm just the development guy. You're the celebrity. And you know and remember from over a year ago all these things, and that I was about to get married when we had talked. Like, I felt so validated and so heard and listened to. And it was just such an impactful lesson that this guy who on screen is this suave, smooth, you know, lovable person that can do no wrong, he was like that off camera. From the lowest level PA to the highest level executive, he only talked to people with such clear focus and understanding and excitement that you couldn't call it anything but absolute trust. Because he not only was able to let you feel like you could be who you wanted to be, but he encouraged you to tell him more and to be a part of that story. And so to this day, I still evangelize Brett as being one of the most caring and empathetic listeners. And, you know, when I say he's an empathetic listener, I don't mean that he feels like what the other person is feeling, but he just creates this space to allow you to be who you want to be, like I said, and share it. And that to me is one of those hallmarks of like, I understand why he's a celebrity. I understand why everybody loves him. And I understand why people are loyal. And to this day, like I said, I still evangelize him as being one of the most caring and empathetic people, and who taught me that lesson that I've ever worked with. It's amazing. So that's an example, a little more concise how I say it in the tenets, but that's an example of just these interactions that I've had. And I could have learned that same thing from the barista, you know, or from somewhere else. But people also, I think, when they hear that these people who we see as celebrities and these people we aspire to be are real people that have these same thoughts and feelings and wishes for the world, then I think it resonates a little bit more for the people listening.
That is an amazing, thank you. That's an amazing personal story that gives me insight into someone whom I've never met, but now I feel as if I get to learn a lesson from them through you. It's almost like contagious in some way. And I could see how that has a spillover effect into relationships. Like that is amazing. We do put these celebrities sometimes on this pedestal. And if you are, 5 people away, maybe you don't even really know why they're a celebrity. You just think that they're famous. But when you get to talk to somebody who knows somebody, you go, well, let me tell you about the great qualities this person has and what they taught me. I think that's
Right.
maybe that's what's missing from the idea of maybe that's why we're seeing this new form of communication emerge, because that kind of fell away with the scripted stuff. What do you think?
Yeah. I think we all are longing for creative ideation
I
these
like that.
days and for connectivity. And I think we have we're I think we're experiencing an overcorrection from
Mhm.
where we were, that from the polished to the individualized to about me. I think after COVID, we were all
Oh
looking
yeah.
to feel reconnected and feel deeper, meaningful connections in everything we do and wherever we are. So I think we're in this kind of like age of Aquarius type,
Yeah.
revelation and revolution towards it's just not acceptable anymore to go back to the way it was, you know?
Yeah, I do know.
It kind of just makes me think like, when someone lifts off the veil and you actually see behind the curtain, how do you go back to being blind, right? Like, and that's kind of how I feel we're at this place post COVID, or we're still in COVID. I know there's surges, like, but the narrative is we're telling, it's something we're still living with, but it's something that I think we were longing for, that human connection. And again, like I made the crack earlier about like, oh, you're lucky to work here kind of thing. But I think it's true. Like, I think gone are the days where companies can just hire and fire people at whim, and not have a great work culture environment, and not have certain incentives that actually create a work-life balance. And speaking of work-life balance, I think the one thing that COVID shows is there's no such thing as a work-life balance. It's all life. So we have to bring more connectivity and creativity to it. And when we do that, the better we're all going to live. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think it speaks to the idea of meaning. I know for me and a lot of
mm,
my friends in COVID and a lot of the people that I've spoken to, it was a real big wake up call for people to be like, what am I doing with my life? What kind of life do I want to live? Who am I? It
that's
really moved that curtain back, like you said.
when I switched out of entertainment, honestly. And that's when I made the jump to this the tech world, and of medicine. I had a really good friend who I worked with before, Erica, and she said, hey, I want you to come jump ship from what you're doing and come to this medical genetics company focusing on hereditary cancer. And I said, well, cute, but I know nothing about medicine like that, and I know nothing about sales in that way, and business development with these kind of businesses. And she's like, don't worry, it's just we need big outside the box thinkers, we need creative leaders, we need these kind of this new way of thinking. And so that was kind of the foray into, let me see, and the impetus of why I'm here with you today is, let me see if I can apply the same things that I did as a talent manager to a completely different industry with no experience, but follow these same core tenets. And then at that point, see if it comes out of a success. Because, like you said, if I walk the walk, I have to talk the talk. And, I can't be espousing these things that, like, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you kind of stay true to yourself, and you kind of find either your own core tenets or borrow mine for a while that help guide you, you can do anything. So I had to actually prove it as a use case for myself before I could start talking to people about it and speaking about it.
It sounds like your relationship with uncertainty was challenged at that point in time. Maybe you could talk to, what is your relationship with uncertainty?
That's a good question. I think I'm getting better with it, to be honest. I grew up knowing I wanted to be in the music industry. That's all I wanted to do. And I wanted to be in entertainment, and I wanted to be a manager. And that's just what I set my goal to. But naturally, as new opportunities came, that I saw a value in pursuing,
Yeah.
I had to inch out a little bit from my comfort zone. And
Right.
I had to figure out a way of, if it's something that I really wanted to try and explore, not be afraid of losing what I have, but losing what I could possibly gain by not even trying is crazy. And I think on my career path, like I used to have, bits of issues at times when I would, you know, uh, try to interview for something that was like a little bit out of the wheelhouse, like in entertainment is very much in line. If you're a music marketer, you're a music marketer. You're not a TV show marketer. You're not a this marketer. You're not. It's like it's so the lane. So I started out in the record industry, and then I went to the talent agency world, and then I did TV and working with music and creative development, and then I went to a tech startup focusing who had music projects, but we're doing more things in medical and these other things. And then I ended up at a genetics company, and my story throughout all of that, and you could see how those progress, they diverge a
Yeah.
little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then till you see the end, record company, medical genetics, right? But the whole through line and the whole story that I created, and I had that narrative around, that I had to not only remind myself and tell people, is like, my through line is working with talent. It's and talent is all of us. So growing and developing businesses and going to market with certain strategies and selling products, what's really the difference besides the major, things about the industry? It's all a lot of the same skills and soft skills and the hard skills too. And so I think with uncertainty, again, like I had to ease myself into it, but then I get more comfortable with it every time I do something different that interests me, because life's too short and I've learned too much to just do anything that doesn't interest me anymore. So when you look at like that span and that range, yeah, it looks like a huge divergence, but it's something that I had to talk myself into every time. Like, can I do this? Am I valuable enough? Do I add actually any value to
Mm.
this? Like, does the story make sense? Why would I go from this to this to this to this? But it's like, how am I telling that story? I'm telling that story with confidence that yes, I can do this because I have done it. It's just got a different, name. It's just got a different story, a different path, but it's the same work.
Yeah. It reminds me of a quote I heard one time that says, growth and comfort can't coexist. And it sounds to me like a lot
Mm.
of your success and your creativity comes from your relationship with uncertainty.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting quote. It's growth and comfort can't coexist.
Yeah, like if you're comfortable, you're never really becoming the best version of yourself. You're slowing
Yeah.
down on some level, or you're getting calloused on some level. It's like too
My
easy.
yeah, my first thought is kind of like, I think there still will be growth, but how slow a growth is that going to be, right? I think it's
Well,
it's it's monumentally slower, right? If like you said, you're comfortable, and then you have to ask yourself, why am I comfortable? Because I got the job on lock, or because I'm not being challenged, or because X, Y, and Z. I think you're right. I think that it takes that real uncomfortability, that discomfort to push you in a way to actually grow exponentially. Like
yeah,
you have
right,
to stretch and learn and grow. Like actually,
right.
this bracelet I wear every day, it's was gifted to me by a friend, Adam Roa, who's this great musician and kind of a spiritual guru and
Yeah.
athletic trainer and all the things. And when I started my job at Myriad Genetics, he gave this to me. It's this little brass bracelet, and it just says "Seek discomfort."
Hmm.
And I wear this every single day because when you are in a place like you said, unless you're being challenged to grow, you don't have that ultimatum. Essentially, you don't have that thing that's saying you need to figure this out, and if you don't, you're looking at uncertain failure. And I think that's the best motivator in a lot of ways. Not a failure in terms of there's punishable setbacks. I don't think we should look at failure as um, and I think that's a question I ask people in my keynote is, does your manager, your manager, whether it's your boss or your mom or
Yeah.
your cousin or your barista, do they look at failure as being a punishable setback or as an opportunity to grow and learn? Right. And if they see failure as a punishable setback, then that may be a culture that you may not want to align with. Like, because
Mm.
I'm talking about creating cultures of empowerment and creating cultures of reciprocity for mutual growth and success with everybody. So if I'm going to be doing punitive punishments for people who are trying to grow and trying to stretch and trying to learn, and then I punish them for falling short of their goal, like, what is that fostering? Doesn't make a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a tricky mindset though, especially when you're trying to, for a lot of people who have been set in their ways for a long time. Maybe
Mm.
they get to this point where like, okay, well, if I'm going to lose everything if I do this. I'm afraid to jump right here. And then what do you do when you find people that are talented like that, but they've lost the will to jump? Is there something that you can do to kind of push them?
Yeah, and I wanna make a quick distinction too, because,
Yeah,
like, I'm a father of 3, right? So, like,
absolutely. Me too.
I'm at this point in my life, I'm not a 22-year-old male that can take a leap of faith and
Right.
always do something. So, I do recognize that, like, not everything always makes sense for the health and well-being of your family, depending on the extreme, right? But I do believe that nothing's impossible. So, I'll say that,
Right.
full stop. Um, and I think that when I kind of lost again. Ask that last part of the question again, because I thought I had it for a second.
Well, it seems to me like sometimes in periods of our growth, we're faced with an opportunity to
Oh,
live out something we want. Yeah.
right. So, like, and thank you for getting that. See,
Mhm.
true live stream of consciousness. I think that if you're taking a risk, that's great. And when you want to help somebody, taking a risk, helping someone who's taking a risk is a risk for yourself. So
Mm,
I think one of the rules that I follow is you can't care more than the talent. You just can't, because you can see. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying, is like, you encourage people to take risks and you want to help get them there. You can't push them over the edge to do it, especially if they don't believe they can do it, because then they're going to fail. And then that's going to not be conducive to your time, energies, and efforts. So I was always very conscious when I'm working with talent, musicians especially, is I would catch myself earlier in my career caring more than they did and pushing towards getting results, and knowing that, wait, that's not my role. My role is to encourage and shape and develop and all these things. You're the talent. You have to care, because if you're just doing something because I tell you to do it, then the passion's not there, the success won't be there. And so I do think, like I said, there's that balance of taking calculated risks for sure, and encouraging the whole team, the whole group, everybody that's with you doing that, to be just as invested, if not more than you. They have to be. Everyone has to be on that same level.
yeah, environment seems key. Sometimes we find
Mm.
ourselves in the environment that's conducive to growing and learning, and sometimes we find ourselves in the environment that's pulling us back. It's an interesting
Yeah.
road.
Who's your support team? It's like, who are the people you surround yourself with? How do you evangelize them? And if you really are, and you're really doing it in a way that's authentic,
Mm,
and not just using people to talk up your net, like, oh, whatever the case may be, I'm kind of just espousing this group of people. But if you're actually doing it in an authentic way, and you're choosing people to be surrounded with and to learn from and have a little bit of cooperation with, then at that point, then those people are going to have reciprocity, and they're going to actually want to evangelize you and follow you into battle. So,
mm.
I think that's a huge point that you just brought up, is that network, and how do you craft and create that and mold and develop it, and enlist people's help for different functions and for different outcomes. Because when you're getting looking for an answer, not every answer can be used, like, hunted down from a lone wolf. You have to sometimes enlist that help.
You know, I'm a big fan of altered states of awareness. For me,
Mm,
I'm a big fan of psychedelics, and one thing that they have done for me is change my relationship with the way that I see myself, and allow
mm,
me to surrender to some of the mistakes that I've made. It can
mm,
be devastating to some people to, oh, I can't believe I did that thing. But if you can find a
right.
way through breath work, or maybe it's through exercise, or through some medium, if you can find a way to approach a bad situation without judgment, it can really give you clarity on how to move forward. What's your thoughts on that? And have you ever found yourself there?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes a little bit back to that embracing failure kind of
Yeah.
part, you
Yeah.
know, and that reflection that you're talking about,
Yeah.
and being okay to fail, and how do I move forward? Like, you know, Nicole Richie actually taught me that,
Yeah.
is that she, I won't get into the whole story, but she was the one that taught me, of course, and we recognize, and I talk about this, she's well resourced and she has a lot of resources that other people don't have. But the point of the matter is, she has a lot of, she's an author, she's a
Mm,
fashionista, she's a talent, she's a poet, she's a musician, she's an activist, she's a author, she's all these things. And the point is, she told me, I only ever do things that interest me. And I said, "Okay, that's a little novel at first," but then as we were talking, it kind of hit me. It's like, yes, of course she's well resourced, but she has
mm,
the drive and the passion to go after every single thing she wants that interests her, and she attacks it with her full energy. Now, she then told me, she's like, "And if it doesn't work out, then it's okay. I embrace it and I move on." And I think
mm.
that's the whole thing, is like that the idea of having that tenacity, like trying, like I said, I never fancied myself a talent. I never thought I'd be doing keynote speeches, but it was something that I wanted to do and I wanted to try because I felt passionate about it and I wanted to put out my work and put out my thoughts and my ideas. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay. And I'll move on to something else. But I would have the regret for the rest of my life as I was like, man, I got these great core tenets that I should really be talking about. And, who knows, like, maybe I could speak on it someday. And, and if I just never pursued that, then I'd never know. So again, I think finding that interest and being okay with that failure is, like you were saying, that's how you kind of, you move on. It helps you actually experience the full experience of it, push through it, and then be okay after the fact if it doesn't work out, or if you fall a little short. Doesn't mean you can't try it again, or try a little differently the next time.
What is your relationship to curiosity? Like, this is a two-part question. The first part is,
Mm.
what is your relationship to curiosity? And when you think of the word curious, what question comes to mind?
uh when shit hits the fan.
Let's
i
unpack
i
that.
I know, honestly, yeah, no, and I know that sounds so random, but I started learning recently and using this practice of, instead of always looking at something that goes wrong. I'm an anxious person. Like,
Okay.
I'm like a cross my t's, dot my i's. That doesn't look dark enough, let me
Mhm.
double the t, let me triple dot the I. So, and so so obviously you can imagine, just being a person in life, shit hits the fan all
Yeah.
day and goes off rails. How many times a week do you have a day that goes exactly perfect to plan, the way you planned it? Never.
Never. It
Like,
never happens.
never happens. So
No.
do you imagine that source of anxiety then, when I'm confronting myself with that every day of like, oh, this someone's asked, "How's your day?" And it's like, "It was okay, I guess. I had this one bad phone call." And you're like, "Oh, but you went to your daughter's soccer practice, and then you came home and you cooked, and then you're watching a movie with the family, and then, the two other deals you closed, and like the person you helped, that doctor on the other line,
Right.
and why is my day relegated to that bad experience, right?"
Right.
So the point being is, I stopped looking at things. I'm trying to look at things, instead of it being a pain point. I'm trying to look at it a sense of curiosity. Like, huh, what if things do work out? Or, wow, that really hit the fan there. I wonder how we're going to make this better. How are we going to resolve this? And so, of course, that's a little bit of a different spin on what you're talking about in terms of curiosity. Like, just the general curious nature. I think I kind of talked a little bit about that, when I think that I go and I explore things that interest me, and I try to figure out if I have the passion enough to actually take it the next step further. But now, when you talk to me about curiosity, I immediately think of how, I wonder how this is going to change. And if you look at things through a sense of a curious lens, as opposed to it being negative or positive, or whatever, it really does actually give you a true dial in point as to what that real raw emotion that you're feeling, you know? Like, it may not be fully positive or fully negative, but let's be curious to unpack my feelings about it. Like, how does this shape me? How does it make me feel? And what can I do to make it right from my own perspective? So it's
It's
a little different direction I went there.
I love it. Yeah, that's why I always ask that question. I'm always curious to hear what other people how they interpret curiosity. And when I start thinking about your background, the idea of harmony comes into my mind
Mm.
because you've worked in music and you've worked with talent. And I think that harmony can be defined in so many different ways. How do you define harmony?
Yeah, I guess harmony is like a present moment state of being almost.
I
Like
love it.
in my mind, because when you look at music like a harmony, like it may not be a traditional like Western chord, that
Right.
something sounds pleasant to the ear
Hmm.
always. It might not always. There's dissonant chords too, right? So it can still be harmonious. And so I think that harmony in general is a state of being in a place in your mind when you are right with the world and you can accept it and embrace it for what's happening in that moment. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect because there's no such thing as a perfect moment. But even those brief moments of time where we have that that pump of excitement, that adrenaline rush, and like think like that
Yeah.
perfect moment on a summer day when like you're either having a beer or an iced tea or whatever, and and then your favorite song is just playing in the background, and that slight wind breeze blows, and you have that quick little fantasy about what if things do turn out right with this next gig or this presentation I
Yeah.
have on Monday or this promotion I'm going for, and you have that brief moment where you feel like all is right in the world. Like, that's harmony. And I think if we listen to what's happening in the daily basis and we come to things more with curiosity, we can have more of those harmonious moments. Because if I'm looking for a perfect moment of
Right.
everything has to be exactly in alignment, I'm never going to experience it, and I'm always going to be disappointed.
I love it. Like I do at times have those harmonious moments of insight, and I feel like they're fuel or a light or a brick on the path to making those things happen. Is it possible that those moments of insight or that harmony are like an invitation for you to continue to explore that and actually create that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think when you have those harmonious moments, like you said, you have that little rush of what can
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
what's possible, and that's when you have daydreams. I don't know about you, but I daydream all the time. I daydream all the time about the good, the bad, the real, the ugly, and um, I think that's an incredible point that you just made. Um, it opens up the door to future thinking and more connectivity with yourself, most importantly, I think. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you verbalized it because as soon as you verbalize it, it like gave me permission to think about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I've had that.
Right.
It isn't it interesting this sort of language that happens between encounters. Maybe sometimes you're sitting out in your backyard and you watch the way in which the plants are growing, and it's almost like a language, or you're having a conversation and you share a moment of silence. You know what I mean? Do you think that there is a language that is speaking to us through different avenues, like through bird watching or watching the plants grow or moments of silence? Do you think there's something bigger that's constantly trying to inspire us and speak to us?
100%. And I think that is the nature of why we all exist. I'm serious. We're all
Yeah,
stardust,
love it.
right? We're all stardust, right? So when I see something happening, I'm alive, I'm present, I'm in the moment. That should spark something in me, a thought, a clue to investigate something a little bit deeper within myself, within the world, within what I'm visualizing, with what I'm seeing. Like, these little moments we should take as clues to dig deeper. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us don't take the time to do that and reflect
Yeah.
on what that means. You know, we have to do that. Otherwise, you're just floating through and you're just experiencing what the world wants you to experience, what you're constantly being bombarded with. You have to break away from that, have a little bit more of you know, take those clues and those moments and try to gain some insight to yourself and the world around you when you experience those, for sure.
I know we're kind of, how you doing on time? I know we're coming up on about an hour right here. So.
All day. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, fantastic. Because the next question I have that is along this line right here is, I think it's interesting if we tie together what we just spoke about, harmonious moments, about something bigger than us that's trying to speak to us, the concept, the ideas that you spoke about, Bret Michaels and him, and understanding that he's teaching you something far beyond relationships when he's talking to you. Is that something that you were kind of born with, or did you have a mentor that kind of helped show you the ropes of seeing the bigger picture, or like a sort of a spiritual mentor on some level? Or was there something that happened in your life that kind of opened the aperture a little bit to say, hey, this is a little different?
Yeah, and I would say too, just like what you just mentioned, it sparked something in me is like, Bret Michaels didn't know he was teaching me that.
Right,
Right?
exactly.
He was being his authentic self,
Yes.
and I experienced it, and I took the
Yeah.
time to reflect on it later and see what I could learn and glean from that, and then I tried to implement more of that
Yep.
in my life. So it's exactly what you're talking about when you get those little moments, like how do you reflect and think about it, and how do you implement, and what does it mean, and how does it feel, and what does it make you experience, those kind of thoughts. So yes, and man, it just kind of tripped me out for a second. Yeah. And then I lost exactly again what you were asking on
Well,
that part. So that's so
yeah,
funny.
it speaks to the idea of contagious well-being, like lessons learned from the insights of others in authenticity. And
Right.
like, that there's something magnificent about that. And it happens on a daily basis, and not enough people embrace it. Like, you can walk
Right.
away from a conversation and feel enlightened for a little bit. Like that gift of like, wow, you know what I just learned? Someone's like, who cares? That guy was talking about birds. And you're like, no. Did you see the way he talked about birds? It's sometimes if we can just step outside ourselves and
Right.
get the real miracle of it. Like I want people to embrace that and to understand that every conversation has the opportunity to enlighten you to a lesson on some level. Like the world's full of miracles, right?
I mean, it is. I mean, you can learn a lesson from anything at any point in time if you take a minute. Now, well, granted, not any and everything, probably, but
Right.
I mean, you can take that, and again, it's just like someone gives you any kind of information you learn. Like, where do you prioritize that in your own life, in your own
Yeah.
mind, and how important is it for you to expound upon that? So, I think the people who learn and can tap into those ideas of connectivity, those are the people that will find greater success in life, in their relationships, in their careers. Is that when you listen to those clues and you take in those inputs, you digest them, and then you output something, like, you're automatically going to be better off than the person who gets the input, doesn't even chew it, let alone digest it, and then just moves on. Because even if it's minuscule, like we were talking about earlier, like with
Yeah.
growth, like,
Yeah.
are you challenging yourself to grow? Are you when those inputs happen in those moments of these experiences, these clues happen, what am I doing with that? Like, of course, everybody will grow a little bit through age and knowledge and experience, but you'll grow exponentially faster if you're listening to actually what's happening, and you pay attention to those signs and signals.
Yeah. I've been doing this thought exercise. I want to get your opinion on this. I've been
Mm,
making my way through the world where I envision everybody I talk to is the
mm,
planet talking to me. So when I see
mm,
somebody and like they do something that really bothers me, that I would normally be like, where I would get mad and be like, that's so annoying. Like, I realize that that's the world telling me that I'm annoying. Like, hey, you know how I know that that person's annoying? It's because I'm annoying. And I do that, and I'm recognizing in that other person right there. So I always start laughing. Like, I start off, and my wife, it drives her crazy because I'll be like, I just put my head and I start laughing, and she looks at me and she's like, oh, I don't even want to know, George. I don't even want to
right,
know, but it's,
right.
I it's been a really cool thought experiment. It's really helped me understand who I am. If you can just see everybody as like a lens or a mirror on some level, you can do a lot of learning. And it's helped me pull myself out of like a poverty mindset where I was angry or I was upset all the time, or maybe scarcity is a better word. Have you ever found yourself in like a scarcity mindset? And if so, how do you get out of that?
Yeah, I think exactly what you were saying about imagining it as a world. I imagine that as myself. Like I'm working on it, of course, more and more. But when something like that happens, I'm like, well, what does this say about me? Because
Yeah.
honestly, they don't care. It stirred something in me that brought it up
Yeah.
and made it personal to me and pissed me off and made me feel that way. So like, what is that saying about me?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting mad at them about, or angry or frustrated, is something that I'm recognizing on a subconscious level about myself that I do not like.
Yep. That's well said.
So you have to understand that those little microaggressions you feel, or is there something inside of you that you're just not vibing with, and something isn't just off, and instead of trying to blame them and point the finger, you realize this is something that is happening inside of me. Like, you get cut off on the freeway. Yeah, you might be scared or shocked for a second because your adrenaline's pumping and you almost got hit. This guy almost hit you or whatever. But shouldn't it stop at that? Like, shouldn't it stop at like, I got scared for my life for a second or for whatever? No, then you're like, oh no, I got it. Yeah, like this guy, like I hate the bumper sticker.
Right.
It's like I'm taking out this frustration and anger or whatnot on somebody else because they just gave me an input. I
Yeah.
digested it, and the output I'm getting is not equitable with like of what I should feel about that person. It's what I feel about myself. Now that might be a bad example because it's driving and everyone gets road rage at times, but I think that's kind of just harkens back to the whole point. Is like we're all connected. Like I said, we're all
Yep.
stardust. We're all made from literally the same materials. So there's got to be some kind of empathetic connection that we have on even a super subconscious level. Like we have to be. So let's use that clue, because on the one hand, if we think about it like all theoretically, if somebody does something to me, since we are all from the same thing, that's kind of like me doing it to myself. If I have that,
Totally. Yes.
if I have that mindset, and I know that what they're stirring up in me is something that I'm not happy about myself, I'm not happy with about myself, then that's when I feel it deeper. That's when it hurts. That's when it cuts. And that's when like you kind of have that misplaced anger. So if you take that moment and you can take a pause and a breath and realize like this is something in me that needs to change. I think those are the people who not only communicate better, they feel more connected and they live better lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they do too. On some level, we talked about whether it's road rage or relationships. When we look at generational trauma, the word programming comes to mind. And you've worked with genetics on some level. Maybe we're pre-programmed to relive out the fears that happened to our mom or our dad or our ancestors on some level. Like we're reacting out these irrational fears or perhaps irrational dreams sometimes. And maybe we could I'm trying to tie together this idea of programming, because I think the programming that we get coming into this life in some ways echoes the program that we've seen on TV. And an example of that is anybody who's ever watched a sitcom and then has watched that same sitcom without the laugh track. Like, it's not very funny on some level. But if you think about it on a grand scale, you watching a program with a laugh track, being taught to laugh at something that might be a little bit sinister, you carry that sinister vision of programming with you throughout there. And now we have this new version of programming, this new version of communicating, or this new version of connection. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence, right? Like, I know that's kind of a meandering question, but I just a shotgun out the back door right there. But your ideas on programming and the way it's evolving, and whether it's trauma or it's connections through future entertainment.
Yeah, so programming, I think, like you brought it up, there's more scientific correlation, and I'm of course no expert, but there's more and more people that are realizing and recognizing that generational traumas can be transferred and they do get
Yeah.
kind of, absorbed. So on a scientific level, I think there's some evidence out there for that. And like you said, we are programmed from the moment we come out of the womb to do things a certain way,
Right.
to achieve certain things, to do the right way of doing it, and those things do change over generations. But we're constantly in a state where we're being told exactly what to do and how to do it if we want to feel valuable and we want to feel successful and we want to feel meaning in our lives. And I think that when it's okay, I used to kind of bring about this example, being biracial. And a lot of people look at me and they don't know I'm half black and half white. They just don't, right? And a lot of times when I talk to people about race is, we're programmed and we're inherently like always looking at people and sizing people up on a human level. You know, first time you meet somebody in person, just your natural instinct is to, like, if you're a guy, you're like, is he bigger than me? Is he buffer than me? Is he cooler than me? Is he this than me? And even on a subconscious level, you're just programmed to kind of evaluate and to have a certain kind of response. Same thing with a man with a female. It's not always sexualized, and I don't mean to label anybody, but it's like, when you're talking to a woman for the first time, subconsciously in your mind, you're like, is this somebody that I can marry and mate with and have a baby?
Totally.
Is this somebody that reminds me of my mother that I'm trying to have this connection with? Is it like, so I think when you first meet people, we're always programmed to, like, instantly in our brain to, like, size them up, figure out how we're going to engage with them within a split millisecond. But I think the difference that changes us from having those experiences and those programmed responses is that pause in that moment of reflection, like we were talking about. It's like, and it's okay to have that initial reaction. It's okay to be like, to meet someone for the first time, be like, I don't know about this guy. He's a lot bigger than me, looks stronger. He might beat me up. But then take a breath, shake their hand and actually experience what the truth of it is, aside from the programmed input that you're provided naturally. And so, like, that was a different way of kind of speaking as we're going across. But I think same thing with the way we programmed our cultures and our communities. There's different ways to do it that are more harmonious and that add to more connection with people. So we just have to break away from those pre-programmed ideas, genetically, societally, physically, all the different ways, and kind of just be open to what is coming at you and evaluating it, and then making a decision based on a universal truth, not on some kind of politics or gender or any kind of idea that is forced on you or that you feel like has to define the box. But look at it as, how is this a universal truth in terms of wanting to feel love and connection, wanting to treat people right, wanting the best for people while wanting the best for myself. And I think if we focus more on universal truths instead of these political lines or these social lines or these divisive tribalistic views on things, that's just half the battle right there. That's half the battle. I mean, maybe we all need to, like, smoke a blunt together or do something like, I don't know, we could do some mushrooms or some LSD or something like that. And that's the crazy thing, is when people talk about that, it's almost like a tongue-in-cheek joke, but obviously the science behind it, the soundness of unlocking parts of your brain that are breaking away from that pre-programmed life that we've been accustomed to for however many days, weeks, months, years we've been on this planet. And again, it's not saying like, oh, everyone just go drop acid and drive on the freeway or whatever. But like you said, do you find that openness and that connectivity through yoga and breath work? When you unlock parts of your brain by communicating with people or by listening to stories or listening to music, like how do you unlock parts of your brain that give you the more creative freedom to experience life in different ways? I think that's the key. And I think we need to find more creative outlets, to do that.
Man, now you're talking my language. I have an affinity for psychedelics, and I remember the first time that I did mushrooms when I was like 17. And I went to the Pink Floyd laser show, and me and my buddy split like an eighth. And I'll never forget this feeling of first being out of control and then a warm wave of knowing washing over me, where things made sense for the first time. And I can't explain exactly what it was that made sense, but I can explain to you the feeling of wholeness that I felt for the first time. Like, oh, and I get goosebumps when I think about it right now. There's a plan. Oh, there is something bigger there. Like,
Right.
I feel like so many of us are brought up in this world of isolation, whether it's our family's views, our community's views, and rightfully so. Like, those are the rails that are placed upon us to keep us in a lane. Here is the standard default mode network. You can stay safe. But for those who find the spark of creativity, or for those who are wandering or curious, there's a trail off the beaten path that's calling your name. And psychedelics, on some level, for me, I don't advocate it for everybody, but they have helped me fundamentally create a linguistic pathway to describe a better reality. And once I had that linguistic pathway, I could walk towards it. I could see it. I could imagine it. I could visualize it. I could bring it into my world. I could grab it. You could
You were
translate the
exposed to a new
world.
reality. Yeah, you were exposed to a new reality, and it
Thank
gave
you.
you an idea of what is possible and what can
Yes.
be. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, even, and that's I think one of the disservices, people who do casual drugs, who don't understand why they're doing it or what they want to do. And there's nothing wrong with doing casual drugs if that's what you want to do. I think that we're always, 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 always trying to find ways to connect with more people
Yeah.
and to be on the same level. And so, however we get there, um, we need to all get there, right? I think that, again, like, the disservice I'm talking about is, like, I think people who go to a party and like and do drugs or whatever and do psychedelics, like, my wish for them wasn't to do it or not to do it. My wish for them is, while you're doing it, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? What
Yeah.
are you learning from that? What are the clues you're
Yeah.
pulling from it? And like a lot, I think that's the difference in people's mindsets, is that, like, having that seeker mentality and that
Mm.
wanting to find out, like, more things about yourself in any situation, whether you're on
Yeah.
drugs, whether you're on sober, whether your child is screaming at you, whether your boss just yelled at you, whether you just felt guilty for cutting someone off on the freeway, you know, be open to those clues and those signs, and hear what something's trying to tell you, because you took the time to listen and hear, and had a profound impact on you. How many of those profound impacts are we all missing every day by just not listening? Like,
A
I don't know.
lot. A lot. I think I feel like we're on the cusp of, I feel like as a species, we're just beginning to learn how to communicate. For so
Mm,
long, if you look back at the problems that we've had, it's just this inability to thoroughly communicate meaning to one another. Like, we have so many people side monologue, or they, like you said, they don't
right.
listen and they're waiting to talk instead of, like, I wonder what this person is trying to tell me or feel. But every now and then you hear a song, or you read some poetry, and you're like, I get it. It's this light bulb goes off. And I think with AI, with this sort of ability for you and I to come across and have the stream of conscious of two parts of the planet and have a
Right.
meaningful dialogue and share it with other people, we're finally getting to sound out the vowels to create meaningful language with each other. Man, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the more and more we have the tools around us to experience those things on a deeper level,
Yeah.
AI included. Like,
Yep.
AI is not here to replace us. I mean, it might, if Skynet awakens, that whole thing. Like, but, like, honestly, it's a tool that can help us experience things in a deeper level, find out answers quicker, to
Yeah.
then make a more meaningful life, or to drive towards quicker solutions. It's just like anything else, just like the hammer, just like, elevators
Yep.
and cars and whatever. Like, of course, anything can be replaced by anything else, but it's like, how do we choose to implement these things? How do we choose to look at it as a value add instead of a negative detractor? in a way.
Yeah. Anytime you're afraid of something, you give it power over you, and you can't work with it.
And it's not going to stop it from coming.
It's definitely not. It's gonna paralyze you, and it's just gonna steamroll you.
And I get those people who have arguments that are like, well, AIs are going to take all our jobs, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. If you look at the history of any type of innovation, there's a certain percentage of jobs and people that it does displace, and that is an unfortunate reality of innovation. But how many more jobs are created because new industries are created, and because new modes and things that we can't even conceive and comprehend right now of what that means for us, what that actually is going to drive towards for us. We can't even begin to think of all the use cases. So for me to just, as a blanket statement, just say, well, AI is bad, it's going to kill us or destroy all the jobs, I just don't think that people have an appetite to let it do that all the time. That we always need the humanity, and we always are looking for the humanity. And yes, AI can probably make a dope trap beat and bring Tupac back to life, all that good stuff or whatever. But like, am I going to stop listening to Tupac because that? No, you're not. Are you gonna stop having people make real music? Or some of the best music have mistakes in them and flubs in them, and and you can program a computer to have more humanistic qualities and mistakes like that. But if you just know that you're seeing something that is not all human, I think there's only so much of an appetite people have. I think it's a novelty in some way, and I don't think it's going to take over all of our creative endeavors. I think it's going to definitely help with manufacturing and with computing and science and all of these other things. But you might have seen that, like, they what was that recently, when like an AI was launched, it was like supposed to be guiding a spaceship, right? Like, or whatever, and it crashed and burned, and it's because it doesn't understand all the humanistic things. It's ones and zeros. There's all kinds of things in between that gray area that make us human that it will never replace. So let it replace the things that will benefit us and not destroy us, hopefully, and then everything else we'll pick up the pieces and we'll figure it out together, as long as we are looking for more creative solutions, because clearly all of our institutions are not creative enough. If they were, all big problems would be solved, and all people would feel fulfilled in their work and their jobs. Right. So clearly institutions aren't creative enough. So let's get them a little bit more creative. And how can we do that and help that, regardless of AI, just in general.
Yeah, I think we've picked all the low-hanging fruit. I think that the world belongs to the creator, and in each one of us lives a creator that's just striving to get out and create something and show this unique beauty that everybody has that divine spark in them that wants to create. Like, hey, watch this magic I can do. And I think that's what AI is allowing people to do. And an example of that is people who may think AI is going to take away stuff. Think about watching a really good guitar player. My friend Adam Lopez, awesome guitarist, and he talks about the difference between Nashville and playing live. Because George, when I go to Nashville and people want to record a record, you go in there, you hit one chord, and then they repeat it, like just repeat it for the whole song. He's like, I like to play at a venue because the people, my audience, get to hear me play in a way that I'll never play again. Like, I'll never play the same song twice. Every time it's a new song. You can look back to the 60s or your favorite band. I got to see Lenny Kravitz at San Diego. That was one of his best performances ever. You know what I mean? And like, there's something magic that you share with the individuals when you create something together, whether you're in the audience or whether you're playing. And that's the thing AI can never take away, is like that human component. Right. That one time you hit the bar a little bit hot, a little bit longer. Woo! That was right when I was peaking. Oh, it was perfect.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, like, honestly, music is like the first, like, pretty much like one of the first ways we ever communicated. The first instruments were our voices and clapping and stomping around the campfire. Like, it's just something that's inherent in all of us in terms of communication. And like I said, there's such an amazing, like, when I go hear a concert, I don't want to hear the exact same thing I heard on the record. Right. I want to hear that nuanced sound, that performance. Right. Like, one of my favorite examples of this is Lauryn Hill. Are you familiar with her song Like Water?
No, I know Lauryn Hill,
Okay,
but I haven't heard that song.
totally fine. I think your homework assignment
Okay, I'm gonna
is
write it down right now.
there's a song by Lauryn Hill called Like Water,
Okay.
and she did an MTV Unplugged album of like kind of like a greatest hits compilation back when, those were kind of when
Oh,
Jay-Z
yeah, of
was doing
course.
his and like right. But when Lauryn Hill did hers, she had like laryngitis or like a crazy hangover or something. I don't want to speculate. Lauren, I don't know you. I'm sorry, we've never met. I don't want to ever say legal in compliance. Don't get after me. But you could tell she was sick and she had lost her
Right.
voice. And so by the time she gets to the song Like Water, that is just this like hard piece for anybody to sing. You have Lauren struggling to hit these high notes and her voice is crackling and crashing, and it is the best version of Like Water that you will ever hear from Lauren or anybody else. There gets to this one point at the end of the song where she goes like around, 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 and she's doing this thing with her voice and it's just crackling and that is the peak. You cannot get the crazy shivers and chills when you hear that, and you can't almost not tear up because it's so beautiful. And the thing that makes it so perfect is because it's imperfect and
Yeah.
because it is so human and because it's her flaws and her pain and her joy and everything is felt in that moment. There's no way AI will ever do that for me personally, especially if I know that it is AI. So right there, maybe AI can help me edit my movie faster or color correct it
Mm.
better. Or yeah, those horses in the background, like, let's save some money on the budget or whatever. Like I admittedly, if it came out tomorrow on Netflix, the first all AI film, sound, music, all the things, I'd watch it. I'd watch it to see the novelty of it. I'd probably watch another one 5 years from now, 5 years after that, 5 years after that. But the minute I know that there's not a human element and a human touch in it, that's how we create, how we do it. It just doesn't appeal to me as much. It's like one that's perfect that tries not to be perfect. I don't, I don't know. I don't know if I get down with that.
Yeah, there's a humanness that you can recognize, and
Mm,
maybe it has to do with suffering. Maybe that's the one
mm,
thing that we all share is suffering. And I'm not
mm-hmm.
sure that AI will ever be able to mimic that. You can see it, you can feel it around someone who's been through a tragedy. That is
Right.
humanness. Like, and I don't know that AI will ever be able to do that. And that would be awesome if AI could suffer for us, but then we probably
Right.
wouldn't.
Right. It's like that. It's like the Buddhist saying, life is suffering or whatever,
Right.
and like, are you familiar with the Course in Miracles? You heard of the Course in
Yes,
Miracles?
of course. Yes.
Right. And so like one of the guiding principles, and don't quote me on it, but like in Course in Miracles is, that what we living in as humans, this is the hell. Like
Mm,
this is the hell. Like this is we've deviated from God or spirit or whoever you want to call it. We've deviated from them. We're here now to experience the things we do to each other as people. And when we die, there's no heaven or hell. There's just a reconnection with spirit. And
yeah.
so like if you think about it like that and you think this is like cuz the stuff we put ourselves through on a daily basis, the way we treat each other as humans, the way we treat ourselves, with
Yeah.
that is the hell, right? Even when it's reflected, when we reflect that in the media we see and watch and we do like that, like why would we put ourselves through that necessarily? Of course to learn a lesson, but like the things we do, like we're in it now. This is the hard shit, right? This is the hard shit. I have to believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the unknowable mystery that keeps us
Mm,
both on our toes and at the same time depressed and happy. And it's hard to sit with it sometimes, but I think that
mm,
if you just
of
sit with
course.
it, that's where the juice is. I got
Yes, sitting with it. Yeah, those clues. Yeah.
yeah. I had a couple audience members that sent in some questions, Jordan. Can I ask them to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
Okay.
I forgot there's actually we're streaming this
I
live.
know.
Oh shit.
Exactly.
Legal and compliance. Lauren Hill, I love you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. We Integration of disciplines. How do you integrate the diverse knowledge and experiences from various industries into a cohesive approach to problem solving and innovation?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we all are talking about today and what we're
Right.
striving is that these it's the story we tell each other. It's the
Right.
story we experience. It's creating that through line. You know, if I'm a baker, you know, and I'm used to baking muffins,
Mm-hmm.
I know the art of baking. I understand the concepts of what yeast does and how I have to, you know, cook it a certain way and do certain things and these core principles. Like, who's to say I can't start making croissants? I'm still a baker. I'm just now going to bake something else, but I need to understand my role. I need to understand this little industry part of it, but the core ideas and the core inside that I have is of baking is in there, and I know how to bake something well. I just need to learn and grow and stretch something new. So I think that clear cohesion of industries and jobs and this fake illusion that we have that you can't work in you know in accounting because you came from HR, or you can't do you know be a carpenter when you used to just do steel work. You know, I think you have to give yourself the space and the time to understand that those skills are transferable. Those things that you are doing are not are there's some things of course that are industry specific, but you'll learn those. But inherently the things that you're trying to do, it's that story of that you are a creator, you are a baker, you are a builder, you are a whatever the case may be. You have to always just kind of to remember that, because like I said before, what are the real differences, you know, between industries when you're driving a product to market, when you're creating a
Right.
sales force, when you're doing whatever, they're the same things. You're just learning how to do it in a different industry, essentially, with a different end product.
Right.
Oh, am I losing you? Did I lose you a bit?
Oh, oh, I just a second. It kind of flaked out for a second. Um, do you have any speculations on what the future of entertainment might look like? Oh, I lost you there.
Oh, I'm still here. Can you get me? You got me?
Oh, okay, I got you there. There we go. There we go.
Okay.
Back.
The future
Do
of
you have any thought?
entertainment.
Do you have any thoughts, Jordan, on what? Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're working with a little delay, which is great. True Life Podcast. I think we're gonna make sure that we get this. You know, I it's so funny you asked me that because I was on the airport, or I was at the airport the other day, and I was listening and eavesdropping with these three young women having a conversation. And I love eavesdropping. People watching and eavesdropping is like my favorite thing in the world. So I'm on the LA exit bus, you know, once you get off the bus and I don't know if you guys know this, but at LAX, they changed their whole system. So now you can't just get an Uber at the gate anymore. You have to get on a bus to take you to an Uber place or whatever. So we're on the bus going to the Uber Lyft locations. And, you know, all of a sudden these girls are talking and they're in their like mid 20s, I'd say. And I can tell from their conversation, they actually work in production, right? And I think this is important to the question. And so one of the girls just all of a sudden says, you know, I'm not really into like TV. And I was thinking like that's so weird, you know. I love like I still regardless of what streaming services we have, my wife and I still love like, you know, basic cable shows that are like your guilty pleasure Dick Wolf shows or whatever, you know. And so and I was expecting the girls to kind of be like, "What? You don't like TV? What?" And they both just kind of say, "Yeah, yeah, me too." And so I'm like, okay, now I'm interested. Now I'm interested in what you're saying because I knew they're in some kind of production before, some entertainment production, hearing them talk. And so this woman says that, and then the next thing she says is, you know, I would rather just scroll on TikTok for hours. And she's and then her reasoning behind it was because I'm going to have to watch at least 2 or 3 episodes to really understand who everyone is, to really actually know what the story is, to understand all these things. And she's like, I don't have time for that. And then simultaneously she said, though, but have you seen that new show? It's called like Medieval or something like that, or it's called Ren Fair or something like that. It's about people, Ren Fair, non-scripted. And I thought to myself, that is so interesting. And the point of the story is these are young people in production making content that are so aligned today with short form content that scrolls past, that I can watch something for 1 to 2 minutes, 2 minutes pushing it, and still feel like I've heard a story from beginning to end in a micro way, and now can move on, and I don't have to spend 3 hours of my day or 3 weeks in a row to then, you know, experience something. I don't personally like that myself. Like, I like to do more character development and drive and see what really happens in the art form of these stories, because I do think there is like a lower barrier to entry for entertainment these days. But I think my prediction is, and this is just my naive prediction, is I think that there's going to be 2 camps essentially. It's going to be short form content on all levels, like micro things, and then it's going to be streaming services. And the streaming services, when a new show is out, you'll be able to watch the entire thing every single time from front to end, back to back, so you can either binge it or not. And not only that, I think that the way we're moving, where streaming services used to offer so much more, and we were moving away from kind of like certain monopolies like in television and things. Now we're all kind of coming back to the same thing. Like, you almost have to have, you used to be able to have basic cable and then have like 1 or 2 streaming services and watch everything you wanted under the sun. Now I have to have 15 different streaming services, and I have to have a cable package. And now these people buy this, or this is my favorite sports team. Now I have to actually, buy YouTube Premium or whatever the case may be. So I think people are going to get tired of that model. I think that it's just becoming exorbitantly expensive. And I hope, and my wish, and what I think is probably going to happen is you can probably start buying things a la carte, regardless of network or show. Like, you don't have, like how you can kind of download something on Amazon, like a show or an album or something like that. I think that won't be necessarily, you won't have to be an Amazon member, or you won't have to have Netflix to watch the new Game of Thrones, or you won't have to have this. You can download it on some kind of a generic device and pick and choose where you want to see, and not have to sign up for a month subscription or a free trial, for a smaller price.
It's
in real
fascinating.
time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I know someone who made 12 episodes. They had a documentary, they broke it up into 12 episodes, and then they took the first episode and broke it up into shorts. And it's doing pretty good. It's like you watch the whole episode, but in minute clips. And I'm like, that's a pretty good idea.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that is an amazing, that is right there on the cusp of like what I was thinking, and of course that is way more fleshed out than how I just described it. But yeah, like, like how do you get someone, it's not an either or. It's
Right.
like, do you only watch short form? Or she said, she would rather scroll on TikTok for hours, but then she also liked this one show, Ren Fair or whatever is on right now. And I think it's going around. I've seen it mentioned several times. So, but this person that you're talking about found a way to offer both, right? There can be an opportunity down the road where if it gets acquired by a streaming service or some other network, that you can then send the episodes. But in the meantime, building that fan base, that content, if they're going to watch 1 minute of it and they like that 1 minute, they'll watch the next minute, and then the next minute, and then the next minute. And then all of a sudden your metrics say, you've had 20 episodes streamed in one day, like by millions of people. And those micro episodes end up being one episode. I mean, I think it's fascinating. And honestly, these are things I probably would ask my people who are still in TV, because it's like going beyond me, man. I just want to turn on TV, maybe DVR or something,
Yeah. It's, on that same vein, do you forecast individual creators being able to compete with giant, conglomerates?
I don't think people necessarily want to anymore or have to. Like Lisa Ray, she did the show. It's escaping me right now, but it's been like four or five seasons. It's awarded. It's been, she started that on YouTube, or Issa Rae. Sorry, her name's Issa Rae, ISA, like Issa Rae. And she had a YouTube show that then got acquired, and then it was on a network, and then it got a bunch of Emmys and all these other things after a few seasons. I don't think the individual creator nowadays, like, we have that innate nature, like we said, to want to communicate, want to share, want to tell stories, want to do these things. I think the vast majority of people that are millennials and Gen Zers and Gen Alpha particularly, I don't think they care about competing with the big guys. I think they know that they can be exactly who they grew up watching and aspiring to be in terms of content creators without having a TV deal, without needing to have a major television. Why do that? Brands hit me up all the time. They send me free stuff. They pay me to make a video, to mention on my video I'm already going to do it. And I have 23 million followers. Like, I get asked to go to conventions. People see me in the airport. They know who I am. I'm getting interviewed on my True Life podcast. Like, they have these like, just these different goals and aspirations than what traditional media is doing right now. And I don't think they care to compete, nor would they want to. I think there's probably tons of examples of people who were offered big network deals, but they had to sign away their likeness, or they had to give up distribution, or they had to do this, that, and the third. And they're like, nah, I'll just go upload this tomorrow, next week, and make, however many thousands of dollars, a whatever, or I'll put it on my OnlyFans account, and I joke about the OnlyFans, or like, the Pornhub thing. But, people upload legitimate content to there because it's salacious. But, like, people upload, like, to Pornhub, like, math tutorials that get millions and millions and millions of views, and that creator is getting paid out because the novelty that he's teaching a math lesson on Pornhub. And there's nothing sexual about it at all, but that it's like the incentive is there for him to post it, as opposed to YouTube, is my point. Like, he can get more eyeballs on that because whatever the case and reason. So I think the traditional way of doing media in general is just going out the window. It's going to be evolving further and further. And like I said, we can't even, with AI in it, we can't even pretend to know what direction it's about to go in the next 4 years, let alone 10.
It sounds like math is getting sexy again.
How those rockets launch.
Jordan, you are awesome, man. I truly appreciate the conversation, and I love being able to have a free-flowing conversation and just get to pick the brain of cool people and get to have a cool conversation. And I really appreciate you spending time with me and my audience. But before I let you go, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Yeah, so I would say, if you want to know more about, like, the 12 tenets of talent management that I'm doing, go to jordanrichardsonspeaking.com. And all my social handles, which are actually, full transparency, they're growing. This is like, I just am making the foray, like I mentioned, from talent manager to talent. So at Jordan Richardson Speaking on Instagram, and same thing with YouTube, is Jordan Richardson Speaking. So if you want to learn more about the 12 tenets, my website in particular will give you a great understanding of what we can all learn from each other. And what I'm working on now is just, being the best father that I can be. I have a new daughter that's 3 months old. So thank you. I have 3 daughters. I'm a girl dad, 100%. I always joke that I'm going to quit everything and start a girl band. And what I have coming up is just sharing more things like this. I'd love to talk to people. I love to make sure we're all feeling connected. So I'm still working with Myriad Genetics and doing some great, impactful work with cancer patients, which is incredible. And that's the reason why I joined Myriad Genetics, is because it is the inventor of the industry. It is the gold standard. It is something that we put patients over profits all the time. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what I was doing in music, and then how it works with genetics, go to myriadgenetics.com. And like I said, I'm always open to whatever's interesting me. So.
Well, we'll put all the links down in the show notes down there, and I would recommend that everybody go and check it out and reach out to you. I think we just barely scratched the surface on what you got going on, and I'm really looking forward to all the projects you got coming up. I think it's amazing. Hang on briefly afterwards, but to everybody who joined us today, I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope you realize that there's a little miracle coming your way, and that there's a language trying to get a hold of you. So just listen. That's all we got, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha.
Thanks for having me.